Thank you for joining us on Obsessed with Assessment podcast, the show in which we approach educational assessment from every conceivable angle. Today, we're going to be thinking about professional development, considering how best practice in classroom testing might be passed from teacher to teacher, but also how we could frame the assessing of teachers in a more positive way. My name is Sam Denno. I'm the National Assessment Lead at Twinkle Educational Publishing. My background is as an English teacher in secondary schools, and this is my co-host, Emma Rose-McHale.
Hello, I'm also at Twinkle with Sam. I'm in charge of STEM is what I'm going to say, because it's one of those job titles that people won't understand. But I oversee my lovely STEM content leaders, and also my background is in primary, which I think complements your secondary quite nicely for the purposes of assessment.
Yes, what a good spread. Do you know, given the theme of this episode, it seemed timely to me to mention something that we were discussing last week about the dream scenario for how to use this podcast. You said it, I think, that wouldn't it be good if school leaders saw the podcast as a CPD opportunity for their staff and linked staff to it on a Monday morning when it drops at 7 a.m. every Monday morning, and then encourage their team to listen to it at some point during the week, and then could have a debrief with colleagues at some point later in the week. That would be the dream, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, it feels very casual CPD. It feels like a nice sort of go learn about this thing rather than something something you're forced to do.
Yeah, and I think obviously what we say, you might think what we say is absolute nonsense, and that's absolutely fine. Maybe sometimes it is.
Yeah,
but
in that case, listen to it and then go argue about how terrible it is.
Exactly. We're here to raise talking points. Rather than to tell you what to do. Every episode is designed to be under 20 minutes. Actually, one of them did go longer than 20 minutes, but only one. And we see it as a blast of friendly chatter, which is just intended to stimulate ideas. So if you're looking for a CPD outlet, then maybe this is the one for you. Tell your colleagues about it. The bulk of the wisdom in this episode comes from assessment specialist Dr Mick Walker. Mick is the president of the Chartered Institute of Educational Assessors and has worked for or with every major assessment body you can probably think of in England and various ones overseas as well. He and I talked through a number of ideas here, but it all relates to that theme of becoming a better teacher and thinking about where teacher judgment fits within that. And then at the end, Emma and I will offer some final reflections.
I think, one of the last in the local authority to get a secondment to do my master's many years ago. For me as a teacher, that was fantastic, to go off and do all these things, learn these new things, and then be able to go back into my classroom and apply them. The odd thing about that is that when I went back in a year after, all I got was slated by my mates back at school for being in bed for 12 months. When what should have happened, and my wife's a medic, when she went on courses, she's now retired. But I remember years ago, she asked me to she was doing a PowerPoint presentation. She was trying to do something that wouldn't quite work. So she asked me to look at it. And it was one of her audits. They had these monthly, every 2 months, an audit meeting. So I opened this PowerPoint expecting to see lots of spreadsheets and financial type things on there. And what I saw was, it was about heart bypasses and putting stents in. I'm going back some years now. And it was when stents were just starting to take off. It was a kind of the rollout. So Maureen had been on a course, a meeting, where it talked about stents, all the issues about how to do it, the implications around it, like staff training, facilities, you need a new theatre type equipment, whatever it was, to do all this. And what she was doing at the audit was going back to her hospital trust and reporting on this course and saying, this is it, this is what we've learned, this is what we're doing. And the decisions at the end of it were, are we going to follow this procedure? And if so, what are the implications? Like, staff training, buying new bits of kit and what have you. This was the obligation that she had. Any training she went for in the medical profession, it was built in, baked in is the phrase, I think, that when you go back into your department, back into your hospital, back into your trust, you feed that back in. So it's not just you that's getting that information. A, you're sharing it, and B, you're making decisions about how we're going to adopt this practice. I don't see that happening in teaching. I don't see people going on CPD and then coming back into the school and running a session. I mean, I know it does happen, but it's not routine. Okay, you've learned this stuff. That's great. But, what the hell are you doing with it? How are you bringing that into your practice? How are you bringing that into the practice of your department, your school? And I think we need to see more of that, so that there's a kind of an obligation, if you like, a contract, that if you go on one of these courses, you are obliged in some shape or form to report back. Even if you report back saying it's all rubbish, we're not going to do it. It's madness. That's fine. That's a decision that can be made. It all feels very ad hoc. I get to at least one school every week. I still, right to this day, have maintained that, and most weeks exceeded that, and I'm still learning. I've never left a school without driving away or sat on the train thinking, God, that was good. I wish I could try some of those. I can pass them on to people now.
Yeah.
But when I was moderating, I used to see these things, go back and try them. And sometimes they worked, sometimes they didn't. And even we have all these observation things that go on now, lesson observations, and they seem to come across to me as being somebody put under the microscope. For me, it was the other way around. I used to see some of my ex-colleagues teaching, and I used to think, oh God, what a great way of doing that. And I'd go back and try it, and often it wouldn't work because I didn't have the skill that they had, or whatever it was. And then sometimes I tried it 6 months later, and it did work. But just watching one another, and I am a thief. I am a self-declared thief. I will pinch a good idea. I hope I will recognise it and give credit where it's due. I think the more we can share experiences and knowledge and approaches and open up our classrooms, so that someone's not at the back just judging you all the time. The first HMI visit I had as a young teacher, I'd only been teaching a few months, and my head of department said, so-and-so HMI's coming in, do you mind if he comes into your class? I said, yeah, I don't mind at all. I hadn't got a clue what an HMI was, to be honest, thinking back. But this bloke came in, and he sat at the back, and I wondered, what exactly is he doing? And then he spoke to a few kids, and then when the lesson went, we sat down, had a chat, and it was fabulous. It just went through some of the stuff that he'd seen and what he got from the kids. And I always remember at the end, he just said, because he did pass quite a lot. It was the reason he called in, it was on his way back home from somewhere. And he said, would you mind if I called you? I said, I'd love it. Because he told me things, either to reassure or to say, have you thought, in a nice way. He didn't make me look an idiot.
Yeah.
Although he's probably saying that's what I was in some of the things. But he did it in such a way that it was a joy when he came into the class. And I think it links with the model we've got now of Ofsted and stuff. If only we could just turn that round a bit, so that we could utilise that. So it's not seen as it's an assessment. That's what it is. And it's again looking at that and thinking, maybe this person could tell me something that's of use.
Yeah, and even going forwards from there, that actually assessment should be beneficial to everybody. It should be beneficial to the learner and to the teacher. Equally, it should be beneficial to the as you say with the inspector. It should be beneficial to the teacher and to the inspector as well. The inspector should be able to look at that and go back to their crew and say, here you go, this is what I've learned, this has been my learning. It is that sort of unfortunate sort of negativism that we sort of associate with assessment, that it has to be a judgment, and it's not. It doesn't need to be a judgment, does it?
Absolutely right. I think I mentioned earlier, I was an advisor, then later on an advisor in a local authority. And I remember visiting schools and watching a teacher do something and saying to the teacher, that was fabulous. Would you cut next at the teacher centre? Would you attend the next meeting or whatever? and just tell people what you've done or show people what you've done. And the fear, he used to put the fear of God up to these poor people. I mean, when they did come, I mean, they all did eventually, oddly enough. The nice thing about that, it wasn't me, second-hand reporting somebody, or even worse, nicking the idea and pretending it was mine. It was giving this teacher who demonstrated this wonderful thing the opportunity to share it with other colleagues and then discuss it. And once they got over the first, because teachers are weird. They'll stand up in front of 500 kids and not blink an eyelid. You stand them up in front of 5 other teachers, and a lot of them are really nervous about, so they're being, judged again.
Yeah.
We need to smash that, and just, we're a profession, and we should be talking about these things and have the confidence to say, I do it this way, I try it that way. What do you think? Or it ain't working. What do you think? Or it's working a treat. You want to borrow it or nick it, or could you improve it? So if we can break some of that stuff down, it would be a real bonus for the profession. And we'd be more like some of the medical stuff than about being more of a profession. Not it goes right back to this, the secret garden of the classroom with Jim Callaghan's thing, behind the wall or whatever it was. Let's open the doors, let people come into your classroom, let them see what you do, and have dialogue then about what was good, what might you try this, you might try that, but not as a judgment, a tick list of things.
Yeah,
it seems to be now.
It's all solid stuff, isn't it? On the sharing of good practice that Mick mentions at the start of that conversation, do you think that happened enough in your school experience?
Oh, I think we went through periods of doing a really good job of this, and then the workload just gets on top of you. So I distinctly remember going to a phonics workshop, me and one other teacher at the time, and the whole thing was then we came back and told everybody about what happened at this workshop, which meant that everybody essentially got at least a pre-seed version of that training. And it was really pleasant and it was really nice, and it meant that we all got a chance to be the person who fed back as well, which is, how often do you sit in a staff meeting and you're just told what to do by either SLT or an outside agency, and it put us in charge of our own CPD, and that was very pleasant.
I think the problem with what often happens with sharing good practice in schools is that somebody will stand in front of you during, a twilight session and say, this is what I've been doing with my class. And you'll watch them and think, but that works with your class because you're a huge personality and it's just exciting to listen to you talking. But what you're describing with the phonics thing, and what Mick was describing with the idea of he'd done his masters, and then he went and he thought he should have fed that back. Those are really technical things, which I think are really, really beneficial to staff, and that is one of those big misses, isn't it? It's the proper technical, pedagogical information that needs to be shared and can be shared forward. Then Mick went on to talk about lesson observations, and it echoed something that you said in our episode about Ofsted report cards, which is available on the podcast. Go and have a listen. Very good episode. And you said something along the lines of, wouldn't it be good if schools were excited about Ofsted coming in because they saw it as an opportunity to develop their practices in a positive way as opposed to as a judgment. And what Mick was saying, he said that he didn't even know who or what an HMI inspector was. He just saw it as an exciting opportunity, and that would be amazing, wouldn't it, if that was the context, if that was the framing of it. Did you get much opportunity to observe other teachers in your teaching practice?
Maybe early on, literally NQT. I think later on, the only time I ever really actively went to go watch people was to do observations for the subject that I led. So literally to sit and go, oh, can I have a look at the teaching of this here? Yeah. And then to feed back. It was, I can't say it was ever for my development, although it probably added something to it to see what other people were doing. But the purpose, that was not the focus.
Yeah. But actually, you saying that, it makes me think. I rarely went in and observed other people's lessons in order to give, for want of a better word, a judgment. But actually, I wish I had done that a little bit more because I think that would have been better for me than somebody else looking at my practice and telling me what they thought of my practice. Actually, it would have been better for me to have been observing other people's and taking notes on it.
Yeah.
I really liked what Mick said about sort of being a thief and being an unashamed thief.
Oh yeah, go and magpie all the practice, you know.
So when you're in other teachers' classrooms, I always used to have a notebook, and I always just used to write down like key phrases, things that they said to direct traffic, basically, like how behaviour management phrases, what phrase works. But also in terms of assessment, like hinge questions, what question really, really lands in order for you to be able to gauge whether or not something is sitting well with the whole class, and writing down sort of the way that you phrase those hinge questions to make sure you're kind of optimizing those opportunities.
I remember the assessment coordinator that I worked with at one time saying, "Oh, I've seen this on a course and I'd really love to try it." And she wasn't in the classroom all the time, and I was at the time, and I was like, "Well, I'll have a go at it." And it was really nice. It was some sort of like silly. You can only do it with the really upper key stage 2, but like you coded the assessment. So if they didn't use, I don't know, I'm going to give a really basic example. If they didn't use full stops, you put a little green triangle on it. If they didn't use, such and such, you put a little purple. And they had to sit with each other and work out what they had all missed and stuff like that. And it was a nice children learning off each other, and it was lovely. Labour intensive, but you could have done it, once a month, once a half term or something. But when do people get a chance to, like, if she hadn't specifically said to me, "Oh, I'd like you to give you some time to do that."
So we're coming around to it. It's a time problem again, isn't it? But yeah, definitely the school leaders, school decision makers, government decision makers, these are the things that we need built into sort of teacher timetables, those opportunities to, in bad practice, try out practice, mess around with pedagogy, mess around with assessment. If you find the podcast useful, then click on the subscribe button to get new episode notifications as they come by. Tell your colleagues about us. If you'd like to get in touch with us, you can email us on assessment@twinkle.co.uk or find me by searching for Sam Denno on Blue Sky and LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. Emma's got her hand up.
I was going to say, if you thought this was interesting and you think we should be doing that, go and suggest it to your head teacher. Go and say to your SLT, wouldn't it be nice for us to have a little go at something and feedback on it?
Do it. There's your challenge for this week.
Go for it.
And let us know. Feedback to us how that's gone. Bye for now.
Bye.